Hi, everyone. It's Josh Rubin here with Mark Chin. Today is Friday, December 2nd, and we are here with our latest edition of New York City's Insider. Mark, what do we got for the people today?
Well, let's start with the Insider Index, as we always do. And this is showing a kind of a bounce back to like a more kind of buyer's market type of action here. We're seeing contracts signed down a little bit. Price drops are down even less. So what you're seeing is, a little bit of fear in the market and a little slowdown in the number of contracts being signed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, some of that obviously is the Thanksgiving holiday, right? Things slowed down last weekend.
That's right.
And last week was an abbreviated week. But some of this could be seasonal, and then of course some of this could be the fact that there are fewer listings out there on which we're seeing activity because a lot of the good stuff is now being taken down, right? I mean, some of the stuff. I mean, look, I was just out this morning showing properties for $5, $6, $7 million, and some of these listings have been available for 200 days, but that's not stopping this buyer from making an offer, and that's what's happening. So we're seeing a little bit of what I call the onion theory, which is that the outer layers of inventory are being picked off by buyers who are really in the catbird seat. And so I wouldn't call a market on the Thanksgiving week holiday and its activity, but we are continuing to see a bounce back in the financial markets, relative stability, and we're seeing less inventory. So with that, I know from a macro perspective, you wanted to share some other insights as well.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have been focusing on what's happening in China, and I thought I would just do a little bit of analysis there to give our insider watchers and readers some perspective on, first of all, why China is doing what it's doing over there, and then secondly, to give some perspective on how it might impact New York City real estate. Yeah. So one of the things that we used to talk a lot about is like how efficacious are the vaccines, right? And it turns out that Moderna and Pfizer are about 95% effective. Chinese have two main vaccines. One's made by Sinopharm, the other one by Sinovac. And these vaccines are not nearly as efficacious as the ones that we have are. And what that means is, mathematically, you simply cannot get to herd immunity over there using those vaccines because you need a much better vaccine, or you need the disease to have run its course throughout the society there for vaccines of this kind of like poor quality to be useful. So the reason that China is shutting down with the zero COVID strategy over there is because if they just opened up and let it happen, even though people are vaccinated, these vaccines are not good. And you'd very quickly, I think, have a swamping effect over there as all the hospital beds get filled up, as all of the medical facilities are quickly overwhelmed by the number of disease cases. So that's why they're doing it. And they're sort of push themselves into a corner, right? Because the society in general does not like these lockdowns. It creates huge privations on the Chinese people, and they're starting to kind of fight back with these protests. So we don't know what course is going to happen here. Like the Chinese government is relatively unpredictable. And of course, what people do in mass is also unpredictable. But what we can say is that should there be like a real society-changing event over there, and I'm not saying there's going to be, but if there is one, I think there's going to be a real flight to quality in terms of where money goes. And Josh, tell people what that means.
Well, you're going to see, with a flight to quality, Chinese investors are those who love real estate. That's why we saw a huge run up in the Chinese real estate market, and they're going to now look to real estate in other countries. And we've always seen China be very active in the New York City market, as well as the other major metropolitan cities around the country and the world, from London to Dubai to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, New York, and of course Boston to a lesser extent. But we are starting to see a pickup in activity of the foreign buyer. As I mentioned, I was out with people this morning from Los Angeles, looking at condos downtown. So those people are definitely very active, and they have assets, and they're going to put those assets to use in a way that they can find quality.
I think
What's interesting, Mark, is that New York, even in 2020, never really saw a huge dip, but it never really saw a huge run up as compared to a lot of these other markets, as you've heard me talk about in the last few weeks. And so, regardless of what happens in capital markets in the wake of this, upheaval in China with the protests regarding the zero COVID policies, you're going to see New York be very, very stable.
I think that's right. And here's an interesting graph produced by Knight Frank, which is, of course, a Douglas Elliman affiliate. They basically did a poll of high net worth individuals around the world and said, if you're planning to buy overseas next year, where are you planning to buy? And you'll see here that New York is front and center on most everybody's radar, second only to London. I suspect the reason why London is number one right now is because prices have come down quite a lot in that town because of Brexit. So people are thinking to scoop up bargains there. For New York, I think the reason that we're number two is because just what you said, Josh. When you have a flight to quality, everybody's looking for a blue chip asset. As far as real estate is concerned, there is no more blue chip asset than New York City. So, I mean, we really are the number one, there is no real second place, at least in the United States. Outside the United States, you do have London and Dubai and Singapore and things like that. But
right. And on a global stage, I have to tell you, the only problem with being number one is that you have a target on your back, right? Everybody's out to take your place. So I've always been okay with being number two or number three. But as far as the global scale is concerned, we are, the top city as far as the United States options are concerned, with Miami, Los Angeles, rounding out the three here in the United States. But then when you look at another perspective, of course, that is, where the predictions are as far as the coming years, you'll see that New York is also expected to continue to outperform some others.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. So again, this is data provided by Knight Frank, and it's a little hard to read, but basically what they're saying here is they expect residential real estate in New York City to go up in price next year by about 2%. And that's largely because of the effect that you mentioned earlier, combined with the one that you just mentioned. So the one you mentioned earlier was that we didn't go up as much during the COVID extreme time, so there's less amount to fall. And the second one is, as there is this flight to quality, you're going to see a lot of money coming into the city. So I think, a lot of people in the city are reading these national headlines. They're like, oh my God, real estate is supposed to come down 22% next year. That's sort of like a broad average across the entire country, and it's not really borne out when you look at New York as a specific market.
Right. When you go to places like Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where there's this huge run up and people going off to get their 40 acres and a mule, and wanting to just fish for the rest of their lives in the wake of COVID and the uncertainty and the lack of industry and business and job growth in those communities, you are going to see greater degradation in value. Of course, if you can afford to ride out the volatility in the wake of what is likely to be some form of contraction in the job market over the coming year or two, you'll be perfectly fine even in those markets. But yes, in the coming 6, 12, 24 months, I think you're likely to see some softening in those markets that saw the greatest run up.
I think that's right. And as far as topics that I wanted to cover for this Insider, I'm good. Is there anything else that you would want our readers and listeners to know, Josh, for this week's edition?
Well, I think we have a couple of exciting listings coming up. One of those is a 6,000 square foot loft in Soho. It's worthy of being published in Architectural Digest, and that's pretty exciting. Has 16-foot ceilings, which just incredible scale. So if you want to check that out, we'll be previewing it to all of our Insider viewers, colleagues, friends, far and wide. And of course, if you're in town over the holidays, for those of you not based here in New York, would love to see you even for a cup of coffee. So, reach out and connect, Josh at Rubin Team or 917-749-0941. And look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Insider. Mark, as always, fantastic insight.
Thanks, Josh. See everybody next week.